Brian Shaffer, born February 25, 1979, was a successful medical student at Ohio State University. On the night of March 31, 2006, Brian went out with friends to celebrate spring break. Later he separated from his friends and they assumed he had gone home. However, a security camera near the entrance to the bar recorded him briefly talking to two women just before 2 a.m. on April 1, then re-entering the bar. The strangest part of all is that he was never seen exiting the bar and has not been seen or heard from since. Brian grew up in Pickerington, Ohio, a suburb of Columbus where Ohio State University is located. He graduated from the local high school in 1997 where he then attended Ohio State University for his undergraduate work. 6 years later he graduated with a degree in microbiology. Following that, he began studies at Ohio State University College of Medicine in 2004. During his second year there, in March 2006, his mother Renee died of myelodysplasia and her death was very hard for him. He soon had become romantically involved with a fellow second-year medical student, Alexis Wagoner. She, along with their families and friends, believed that Brian would probably be proposing marriage to her later that year, most likely on a trip to Miami the couple had planned for spring break at the beginning of April. Tropical locations such as Miami were intriguing to Brian. He liked the relaxed lifestyles. He told his friends that despite his decision to pursue a medical career, his real ambition was to start a band playing music in the vein of Jimmy Buffett. On March 31, a Friday, classes had ended for spring break the next week. Brian and Randy Shaffer, his father, celebrated the occasion by going out for dinner together earlier that evening. Randy noted that his son seemed exhausted from having pulled all-nighters earlier in the week cramming for some important upcoming exams. He did not think Brian should go out with his friend William, Clint, Florence, later that night as he planned to do. At 9 p.m., Brian met Clint Florence at the Ugly Tuna Saloon, a bar in the South Campus Gateway complex on High Street. An hour later, Brian called Alexis. She had returned to her home in Toledo to visit with her family before she and Brian were due to leave for Miami. He and Clint went bar hopping, and visited several other drinking establishments. They had spent the night working their way down to the Arena District. At each stop the two had one shot each of hard liquor, according to Clint. After midnight, the two met Meredith Reed, a friend of Clint, in the short north. She gave them a ride back to the Ugly Tuna Saloon where they had started the night and joined them there for a last round. While the three were there, Brian separated from his friends. Clint and Meredith had been trying to find him, repeatedly calling him. They left when the bar closed at 2 a.m. and waited outside for Brian. When he was not among the exiting crowd, they assumed he had gone back to his apartment without letting them know. Alexis and Randy both tried to call Brian later that weekend, but he did not answer. On Monday morning, he missed the flight to Miami he and Alexis had scheduled. He was then reported missing to the Columbus police. Police then began their search for Brian at the Ugly Tuna, the bar where he had last been seen. The bar was filled with security cameras. Police reviewed the footage, which showed Brian, Clint and Meredith going up an escalator to the bar's main entrance at 1:15 a.m. Brian was seen outside of the bar around 1:55 a.m., talking briefly with two young women and saying goodbye, then moving off camera in the direction of the bar, to re-enter. The camera did not record him leaving shortly afterwards when the Ugly Tuna closed. That was the last time he was seen. The Ugly Tuna Saloon was in a high-crime area, so there was the possibility of foul play. It was possible that he could have changed his clothes in the bar or put on a hat and kept his head down, hiding his face from the camera. The cameras might also have missed him. One panned across the area constantly, and the other was operated manually. He might have also left the building by another route. However, the building's only other exit was a service door that was not available for public use and opened at the time onto a construction site. Officers believed it would have been difficult to walk through while sober, much less intoxicated, as Brian was at the time. Since Columbus has the most security cameras of any city in Ohio, more than Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Toledo combined, officers next looked to the footage from other bars to see if cameras there could explain how Brian had left the Ugly Tuna. However, footage from cameras at three other nearby bars showed no trace of Brian. The search began to fan out from the Ugly Tuna, with officers, accompanied by police dogs, looking closely in the street, checking dumpsters and any other waste containers, and asking residents if they had seen him. Flyers were put up of Brian's picture, showing a tattoo on his upper right arm of a stick figure logo from the cover artwork for the single of "Alive" by Pearl Jam, one of his favorite bands, and noting a distinctive spot in one of his irises. The police even went as far as to search the sewer system. No useful information was uncovered. At Brian's apartment on King Avenue 6 blocks from the ugly Tuna, his car was still parked outside. Nothing inside his apartment appeared off. They questioned Brian's friends and family and asked them questions about drugs and enemies in challenging times. They checked hospitals and homeless shelters. They even followed tips and hunches to landfills and riverbanks. Searching miles away from the bar in every direction, police began to contemplate other possibilities besides foul play or an accident. Since his mother had recently died, it was speculated he had gone away temporarily to grieve alone. However, that was not the case when more days passed with no sight of Brian. Those who had seen Brian that evening, including his father, were asked to take lie detector tests. Meredith and Randy Shaffer passed their lie detector tests with excellence, as did all the others, while Clint refused. The two women Brian had last been seen talking to were later identified. However, they had never been asked to take a lie detector test themselves. Alexis called Brian's phone every evening before going to bed for a long time after the disappearance. Usually, it went to voicemail, but one night in September it rang 3 times. I kept calling it to hear it purely because it was one of the best sounds I have ever heard, even if no one picked up, she wrote on her MySpace page. Brian's wireless provider said what Alexis had heard may have been due to a computer glitch. A ping from the phone was detected at a cell tower in Hilliard, 14 miles northwest of Columbus.
Almost 10 years now since that night that he disappeared. We were in medical school, in our first year of medical school, actually, in class. And I thought he was cute, and one of my friends told him at a concert, and then he called and asked me if I wanted to go and have dinner and study. That's how it started. Well, it seemed like it was a pretty good, normal relationship. I mean, I spent time with his family, he spent time with my family, and I mean, a lot of it was all very medical school, centered. That night, I talked to Brian on the phone, and he was getting ready to go out with his friends. So they see him get there, they see him go up the escalator to get to the bar, but nobody ever sees him leave. We made missing posters and we started hanging them all over the place. And then, from there we just started searching everywhere. We looked, up and down the Olentangy River. We looked in every dumpster that there was on campus. I just remember I was very brokenhearted and just very scared. And didn't really know what to think. But I think the main question always came down to, is he dead or did he run away? Those are the two main, did something happen and he just either ended up somewhere nobody could find him or somebody got rid of him? And that always made them think it was somebody that, that could have known him, or, it wasn't just a random thing, or did he just take off? I think it was close to a year before I stopped calling the phone. I think about a year after that was when I finally said, okay, I gotta stop. And so I, would occasionally, but really stopped, calling the phone. You can't put away the other parts of your life when something bad happens. As easy as it would have been, because it would have been very easy to crawl into bed, and the days that when there was no other, things to pass out, when there were no other people to talk to, I think initially it would have been really easy to have done that. I feel like I'm so distant from it anymore that I don't have, I used to have this feeling like he, when it first happened, like how could somebody leave and how could he do that to me? And obviously that's impossible, and so something horrible must have happened. But now with a lot of distance and a lot of time, and now I think I probably have less of, it feels like it happened to somebody else now. I mean, since that point, I got married in 2009, and I've had two little boys since then who are wonderful, and I live in Toledo now, and I have a wonderful practice that I work with, and just busy as an OBGYN here in Toledo, and so just a very busy, full, happy life now. I guess that was one thing that I had, that even though I was part of all of that, then I've had the chance to step away and not have that as a focus forever.
The police received many tips, none of which resulted in any breakthroughs in the case. At a Pearl Jam concert later that year in Cincinnati, lead singer Eddie Vedder took time between songs to ask for tips in Brian's disappearance, but none of those were useful either. Sightings in Michigan, Texas, and even Sweden were investigated. Randy Shaffer, who had recently suffered the death of his wife, continued the search for his missing son on his own. He became so desperate that he had contacted a psychic who had told him Brian's body was in water near a bridge pier. He and Derek, Brian's brother, along with some other people, spent much of their free time searching along the shores of the Olentangy River, which flows through Columbus next to the Ohio State University campus. This theory led police to briefly consider the heavily disputed smiley face murder theory. Brian Shaffer, under this theory, would be the killer's only victim whose body had not yet been found. Columbus police eventually denied any connection to the alleged killer in Brian's case, following the lead of most law enforcement agencies, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that have investigated it. Randy never stopped looking for Brian. In September 2008, 2.5 years after Brian disappeared, a large storm hit Randy's neighborhood in Baltimore. He stepped outside to try to clear some debris and was struck by a falling tree. The Columbus Dispatch hosted Randy's obituary online. Friends and family members posted their tributes. 3 days after his death, this tribute appeared on the website, "Dad, I love you, Brian," from the U.S. Virgin Islands. Police investigated this tip, and it was found to be a hoax. The message originated from a public computer in Franklin County, Ohio. Some people theorize that he was also questioning his study and career choices, and even his sexuality, and he felt trapped in his life. Brian wrote on his MySpace page, "I really love music and this whole doctor thing is just a job, only temporary until I get my band together and put out a record. I want to own an island someday, or at least a beach so I can listen to Buffett all day and drink margaritas with my señorita." Investigators looked into the possibility that Brian changed his clothes and left the ugly Tuna undetected, moving on to start a new life. After extensive research, one of the investigators, Andre Edwards, said he could say with 100% certainty that Brian did not leave via the escalator. Another theory is that Brian attempted to leave the bar intoxicated and became trapped or died somewhere in the area. There was much construction going on in the area around the ugly Tuna when Brian disappeared. Did he leave through a service door and become injured in a construction zone? Police do not seem to think this is a possibility. They have reviewed all footage and conducted thorough checks of the area. Did he somehow slip through the cracks and his remains have been undetected for over a decade? Some people comment and say that developers or building owners are covering up his death after he slipped into an out-of-bounds area, for fear of a lawsuit. Did Brian leave the ugly Tuna and die after that? Brian's wallet and cell phone have never been found, yet his bed was made the next day when his father went to check on him. This infers that he never reached his home after his night out. Did he come across someone and get in a drunken argument with them, resulting in his death? Randy and other searchers spent hours scouring the Olentangy River for signs of Brian or his belongings, and nothing was ever found. Was Clint Florence involved in Brian's disappearance? There are many online theories about Clint having something to do with Brian's disappearance. He was one of the last people to see Brian. Clint was the only person to decline a polygraph test. He also lawyered up. Clint was allegedly a drug user. Could this have been related to Brian's disappearance? If Brian is alive somewhere, family and friends believe that Clint may know more about the disappearance. According to Brian's brother, Derek, Clint spoke negatively of Brian after he went missing, which raised suspicions that Clint was somehow involved in Brian's disappearance. However, there has never been a shred of evidence linking Clint to Brian's vanishing.
One of our area's biggest mysteries. What happened to Brian Shaffer? He was an OSU student who disappeared back in 2006, never to be seen or heard from again.
Now, almost 14 years later, Crime Tracker 10 brought a potential clue to police. Angela Ann explains how the FBI got involved, what they found out, and what happens next.
When it comes to missing persons in Ohio, there is one name that probably resonates more than any other: Brian Shaffer. His case has the makings of a Hollywood movie. A young medical student last seen going up this escalator to a popular campus area bar. But video never showed him leaving. Or did he? Nearly 14 years after Brian disappeared, this photo recently started circulating of a man, supposedly homeless and American, in Tijuana, Mexico. It said, "Help locate." Facebook groups dedicated to finding Brian swore it was him. The theories grew rampant. Brian was alive. So we brought the photo to the attention of Columbus Police and Detective Blanche Tucker.
When you first saw this, what did you think?
I was like, wow, it could be. Could it be? It's a possibility.
Because it does look a little
Like him. It does.
It was the first big break for the Brian Shaffer case. Crime Tracker 10 got unprecedented access to the files, showing the endless interviews and the leads police exhausted year after year.
We still get calls and we still receive tips.
Despite those tips and the neighborhood searches, plus pleas for information, answers never came until this photo.
It appeared that it could be Brian Shaffer, but to see if it was him, I contact, the FBI, who assists us in a lot of our cases, to see if they can do a facial recognition.
So the FBI compared the Tijuana man photo with the others they already had in a file of Brian. It took 4 weeks, but finally, Detective Tucker had her answer.
That it wasn't him.
It was not him.
Correct.
Was that a letdown?
It was. My hopes were high that it could be him.
Foul play has never been ruled out, nor has the fact that Brian maybe just took off. The stresses of life, med school, and losing a mother to cancer.
Do you feel that somebody that has been interviewed in the past maybe withheld information?
I do.
You do? Mm-hmm. But you can't say who yet.
Can't say who.
Under CPD's new cold case initiative, Detective Tucker is now reviewing every binder once again. And while this photo is now a dead end, it is, at least for her, progress in a case that continues to haunt.
It would mean closure. Not just closure for us, but closure for the family and the friends.
For Crime Tracker 10, Angela Ann, 10 TV News.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.